I mean, I've actually never heard of anybody culling their list of followers.
In poker, the feedback loop is almost too fast. It's hard for you to know if you should continue pursuing poker, whether you're winning or losing. You just have to keep playing. The user base is, conditioned and primed already to expect to be mistreated. I love poker, and so I wouldn't spend all this time just out of the goodness of my heart if I didn't love poker. So I certainly love poker, but so much of it is just going downhill.
Hey everybody, Phil here. Today on the podcast, I am joined by someone who is in a lot of ways anonymous. This person posts on Twitter frequently, well, on and off, we'll get into that, under the pseudonym Rachel Lees Thinks. I'm gonna refer to you as RL, by the way. RL is we'll get into your background a little bit, but from what I can tell, poker enthusiast who's been a serious poker player to a degree for a very long time, and someone who is well traveled in the world of tech startups. Would that be a fair, brief summary, RL?
Yeah, that's perfect, Phil.
Cool. So since some of my viewers might not follow you on Twitter or be on Twitter, could you give a bit of a background with regards to your interest in poker? Starting from that, your interest in poker and your poker journey of sorts.
Sure, absolutely. Feel free to interject anytime because I'll try to be brief, but I am covering a whole lifetime, and so 3 decades. I've played poker. First of all, I'm a man, and we can get into why the handle I chose was Rachel Lees. That was a big mistake in hindsight, but it's sort of funny too. Anyway, I'm a man. I'm in my early 50s is how I usually leave it. I've spent roughly 30 years in tech, mostly startups, but also publicly traded companies, large corporations in tech. I've also spent about 30 years playing poker. So my indoctrination into poker came through a girlfriend, of all things, back when I was in college. And so, so my life started similarly to a lot of other people. I was sort of lost. I was sort of distraught. I had some issues at home with my parents, and I went to a elite university, and kind of my future was laid out for me by my parents, by my father specifically. And things sort of went downhill, and I picked up on poker. Played it for about 3 years. The third year is when things started to change, and I found myself lost again. And through serendipity and some luck and some unforeseeable events, I ended up at this small tech company. It wasn't a startup. It had been around since I think the late 70s. And we're in the mid 90s now.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, to fast forward, I had a choice of either partially quitting poker or quitting entirely. And I went with the latter, and cold turkey just stopped and dug myself into my work. And many years passed, and the job became a potential career, and the career turned into a lifetime. And so I didn't pick up poker again until I started playing high stakes poker with a lot of VCs and executives and CEOs in private games around Silicon Valley, Northern California, Atherton, Saratoga. Back then, the big games were in Blackhawk and Danville in the East Bay. And that's probably around the time I got to know a lot of the names in poker, if you will. The celebrity names, the well-known names. In fact, even you, as OMG Clay Aiken. And so, more than playing poker for a living, which I had done during stage one, I was a sort of a good recreational player who was also a fan. And this coincided with the peak of my own career. This is when I became a member of the management team, a top executive, and later to be CEO and all that good stuff. So I dropped poker again. So I'm not the kind of person who can juggle both things. Because when I played poker, I didn't play it for fun. I didn't play it for the challenge of it or the entertainment of it. I found the game to be extremely difficult, similar to golf. But instead of golf, I chose a mind game like poker. And so I had to either do it deeply or not at all. So I have that type of personality. So I dropped it, which takes us to the third decade when I finally decided that I had put in enough into tech and into my conventional career, and my kid was also getting older, and so I retired. Some people would say early 50s is old, but I think most would agree early 50s is rather young for retirement. And so I retired from working for companies or starting companies or things of that
Mhm.
nature. But I still work. It may not seem like it because I'm so.
And tweeting all the
Well, we.
yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're about to say, but we can get into that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I still work. It's just that work today comes at me from past colleagues and people who have worked with me or former bosses or investors, and so I don't pursue or seek out work. It's just they come to me and pull me into something, and I can't say no. Then I get into it for 3 6 months at a time. But other than that, outside of family and friends, I have a lot of free time, and so I started to play. The third and final kind of stage of my poker life was in. It's been a few years since I actually played, but I put in a lot of hours playing No Limit in a dedicated manner for the first time several years ago. I can't say how long I played. Maybe another 2.5, 3 years, maybe. Um, and that segues us into kind of how you met me online, right? Which
Yeah.
is I created this pseudonymous or anonymous handle to just read and see stuff going on in the poker world because um, at the time I had been working with clients and people, and I just wanted to keep the two lives separate. It's just cleaner and easier that way.
Mhm.
And so I created this handle, and at first I went on Twitter and I was just reading stuff. I was watching Live at the Bike was really the only stream that was going on daily, so I'd be watching those things because I played a lot of hours with many of the people who play on streams. So they may not know me, but I know them. So it was interesting to see kind of their views and their opinions about issues related to poker businesses, stuff like that. Um, yeah, so I've said a mouthful there. So did you
Yeah.
want to ask me any follow-up questions or?
Sure. Well, at one point, so you created the Twitter handle to follow poker, and then at some point you started tweeting and you started sharing thoughts about poker and business, and sometimes the convergence of the two. And that's how I eventually happened upon your account. And you, I mean, it's really tough to build a following. It's even tougher to build a following on an anonymous account. But you had been, I mean, by the time I saw, I mean, I don't remember exactly when I saw a tweet from you. It might have been one that mentioned me or Run It Once. But by that time, it was obvious to see that you tweeted so much and so much valuable information. It was clear that despite not knowing who you were, that you knew what you were talking about. And so that's how I found you, and a lot of other poker players have found you.
Yeah.
What has been what was your motivation to begin sharing thoughts and ideas like that, and pretty valuable thoughts and ideas?
Yeah. So the answer is going to be less sexy or exciting than than people would like. So I started to follow poker Twitter
Hmm.
and eventually got bored. The same things were being talked about, and the same points were being made on both sides of the table. And besides pertinent things that I was interested in, people were just kind of using Twitter to argue, fight, laugh, just the normal social stuff. And so I found myself bored. And then an unexpected thing happened. So I opened my Twitter account April of 2019, and in May 2019, Daniel Negreanu and I got into a fight.
Hmm.
Um, and I was frustrated because obviously he has 500,000 followers, and a portion of that following are, zealots, and they just get mad at anything negative about Daniel. And so they started to kind of come after me. And I got frustrated because I'm typically a long form thinker and writer. And so the word limitations really got on my nerves. And so I wrote a big essay, and the essay took off. Um, it really took off. I mean, I think the first week, the number of opens and views were over 20,000. And at the time, I think I had like 20 followers or something like that.
Yeah.
And so within a span of, within 3 months, I had reached the point where I even from 15, 20 followers, I got up to 2,300 followers, 2,300 or so followers from 15. Um, and this alarmed me, and so I started to dig into the followers, and I didn't like what I saw. So
How do you mean?
yeah, so well, how do I explain this? So I didn't mean for I think I think some so I think I don't know this for a fact, but just in looking through their Twitter activities, the conclusion I drew was that there were some kind of bigoted people and some misogynist and sort of incel-like accounts that were following me, and so I had to, and abusive people and mean people, and so I had to really reflect and say, what caused this, right?
Hmm.
Is it simply that they thought the reasoning and logic in my essay kind of right made them a fan and want to see my future writings? And so I reflected deeply, and the conclusion I drew was that I think I attracted angry people who
Okay.
wanted to lash out. So over the course of the next few months, I changed all that. The first thing I did was I blocked, over time, of course, but largely during that initial 2019 period, I blocked over 1,200 accounts.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I whittled down 2,300 to about 1,300, 1,200, thereabouts, and they're still there. So you can go to my initial handle, personal handle, which is Rachel Lee's 69, and they're still there. And so I made a greater leap, trimmed the forest a little bit more a year later when I decided on what I wanted to do, and that was to talk about what I knew and share as much as I can. So increase the volume of writing and see what sticks. And so sure enough, it works. So a lot of people unfollowed, new people followed, and old time readers, ramped up in terms of their engagement and contributing to threads and such. And so I sort of got what I wanted, but I got what I wanted by actually cutting people and doing my best to actually limit the number of followers, if that makes any sense.
It does. This is interesting. I mean, this is not the direction we were going to go, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So if you're, I guess I'm curious what your overall goal is. I know it started it was happenstance, but if your goal is that you have thoughts that you think, can help people and get the word out, then, having more followers, even if they're followers you don't agree with their personal ethics, can actually propel you towards that goal. And a lot of people, I mean, I've actually never heard of anybody culling their list of followers because, I mean, if that you have a follower who's responding with hateful tweets and things like that, or you see elsewhere that they're just a despicable person, and you want to block them individually, sure. But I've never heard of anybody so diligently going through their list of followers and making sure that they're not speaking to a lot of these people that they don't agree with. So
Yeah.
so I guess why is it that you don't want them to be able to see what you're saying, and that you didn't deem it kind of worth it to grow the following as a whole?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think my past informs kind of my behavior and the way I approach things. So I come from not just tech, but I come from B2B infrastructure tech.
Mm-hmm.
And in B2B infrastructure tech, there's a sequence that occurs with demand generation and revenue creation that's quite different than consumer tech or non-tech businesses. And so I view things in terms of a different type of funnel, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the consumer funnel is based on volume and conversion.
Yeah.
And B2B infrastructure tech or deep tech is not necessarily based on volume and conversion rates. It's based on account value and renewals and repeat purchases. And so the amount of time I would need to spend with a volume following detracts and takes away from the time and energy I can spend on the truly important people, customers, if you will.
Right. And by that you mean responding to their responses and engaging them.
Right.
Yeah.
And this even the act of making the distinction between who is worth it and not expends a lot of energy,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so my what people don't see with my Twitter activities and account is that is really for me a salesperson, right? Who's not really selling. They're not saying, hey, if you like what you see, go to my newsletter and pay me. Or if you like what you see, pay me to consult you. I'm not really offering a call to action. What it's saying is, in B2B, we always like to say, don't just go to 200 prospects and see who wants or needs you, right? We say you have to actually be more precise and click down several layers to understand their equipment environment, their organizational structure, their purchasing cycle, their seasonality, their tech refresh timeline. There's so much you have to learn before you even send someone on a cold sales call. And so that's what my Twitter effectively does, which is, you send out a lot of tweets, people pick up on it, most people pass you by. and those who pick up on it are now looking for better ways, deeper ways to engage with you. And so about a year and a half ago, that's why I created the Substack newsletter. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of work engagements, and so I had a lot of free time to write. So I toned down, or I lowered the volume of tweets, and I increased the volume of long form essays. And believe it or not, that's where I see the positive signals, the concrete signals, which is over the last, I'd say, roughly a year and a half, a lot of people have emailed me. Maybe 80% poker players, 20% non-poker players. A lot of people have emailed me asking me for help.
Yeah.
And I haven't taken a penny. I did charge for a paid subscription in the beginning, just to kind of play around with it, to see the conversion rates and kind of see the metrics and learn more about how this works. But I haven't taken a penny for giving advice. I've spent a lot of hours helping people with their resumes, how they should position themselves. To give you an example, most recently, and he follows me but doesn't want people to know, but there's a professional poker player who played poker full time for several years. I think he's a winning player, but we never talked about that. He supported himself for many years. He actually decided to, I don't know if he was a dropout or he never went to school, but anyways, he went back to school, Harvard of all things, and he got a computer science degree, undergrad degree. And he wanted to go after either a low level or mid level role in data sciences, in blockchain technologies at a FANG company, at a large company, tech company. And so he ran into a lot of mental challenges because I think he was anticipating a lot of things, right? Assuming a lot of things, like what the roadblocks and hurdles would be. And so when he started reading my stuff, I think he felt that he had a unique insight or a keyhole into how an executive hiring manager thinks about things. And so it really relieved him. And so he was able to open up to me, even while not knowing who I was. And so he sent me his resume and a body of work. So papers he had written, research he had done into Web3, into blockchain, into crypto, as an engineer, as a developer. And so I was able to work with him and package it so that it's not only can get beyond the gatekeepers at this large company, but he would have the upper hand. Here's how you turn a perceived weakness or a risk, right, and turn it into a strength. And so he ended it by saying that it's been extremely helpful, and he was so thankful. And now we just wait some time and kind of follow up, and I'll follow up and see how he does at some point, or he'll reach out to me. But this is just one of several examples where it gave me the kind of light bulb to say that, hey, you know what? I'm not wasting my time. This is worth it. And for people who don't know, one of the reasons why I tweet a lot is because partly because I'm lazy. And so I tweet about stuff that is instantly retrievable. So that's why you see me talking a lot about my experience, I think, which has the dual effect of kind of building trust and credibility over the long term. But I tweet about stuff that I've lived through and things that are just instantly recognizable. So, like, I don't, other than a few dozen times over 15,000 tweets where I actually researched or read up on things such as statistics to do with the poker industry.
Sure.
I'm literally just sitting on my couch or, in my backyard with my smartphone, just tapping things out. I don't draft. I don't think about things. I just send stuff out.
Well, it's very impressive. I know that, like, for me to, because I occasionally tweet some long threads.
I've read almost all of them, by the way.
When
So
I do, it takes me a very long time. It takes me hours, because I'm not researching, but I'm just drafting, editing. I think I'm just a slow writer. It seems like you can't be a slow writer given the just volume of content that you put out.
yeah. Also, I think your risk reward profile looks a little bit different as a known name,
Yeah,
as a real name, right?
yeah,
Um, so I would be aghast. I would be shocked if like a CEO that I knew, in real life or
hmm
were to kind of do what I do. There are some out there. I mean, we call it the fuck you money, right? There
hmm
are some people who actually believe in the fuck you money.
yeah,
Um, and Shamath, for example, is a guy that a lot of poker players know,
yeah,
who treats kind of external engagements and speaking engagements in that manner. 99% of the people that I know who are as successful or more successful than Shamath don't do that, even with the fuck you money, because we're big believers that the fuck you money is a mirage, right? Because once you get the fuck you money, you don't want to say fuck you want to say thank you. And so um, people are very deliberate in how they speak. They're very cautious and careful in how they speak publicly. And so I think that reflects in your speed of writing content versus mine.
yeah,
Um, it's not that I don't care. It's that the damage to me, the harm to me is minimal.
yeah,
The damage to you reputationally is high. And so
yeah,
I think the prudent thing to do is to be careful. And that's a side benefit of being a pseudonym, but also, as you pointed out earlier, it's also a hindrance or a hassle, because ultimately, business relationships are built on trust and knowing one another. And there's such a severe limitation to being able to build a trust based relationship, a business relationship, even with someone, who is invisible. And so, but I've been surprised that people are very much open to sharing. People are a lot smarter than, you know, um, people may believe, right? And what I mean by that is um, people, for the most part, are very selective when it comes to who is legitimate
hmm
um, versus who is not, who is driving self interest versus who is not or not as much. They're very good at parsing those things. It's sort of like this automatic phenomenon. Um, and so if you're consistent and I think you're authentic and you don't try to manipulate and be contrived, they won't notice it at first. And certainly a lot of people, have accused me of, a bunch of things. I mean, I've gotten everything from death threats, shut up or I'll find out who you are, dox you and kill you, to, get a life. You're a loser. No one cares what you think. No one cares what you share. So, delete your account. So in the short term, you're gonna receive a lot of that, but over the long run, a fraction of my followers, at least, have, I think, found out that my intent is good,
yeah,
and my motivations are genuine.
yeah. I mean, it was clear to me, I think.
Not
Once,
everyone's like you, Phil. That's a compliment.
yeah, fair. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so before getting into some other topics, I have to ask a question. So why Rachel Lee's, and why do you?
Yeah. Um, So, well, stupidity, right, is the
Yeah.
short answer. I basically, like many people, I have a lot of accounts,
Mhm.
and so I couldn't find something, and so I said, "Hey, I'm gonna pick a name that is the exact opposite of who I am." So I'm male, so I'll pick a female name. Um, Rachel was a um, old girlfriend's name,
Mhm.
so I picked Rachel. Lee's sounded Brit, Brit, and
Okay.
so I'm American, and so I figured, okay, that's going to be a curveball. 69 is I have trouble remembering the accounts I create, and having been in the security infrastructure industry for so long, along with other stuff, I'm very paranoid when it comes to writing things down
Yeah.
anywhere, digitally or physically. And so I need to memorize these things. And so 69 is the birth year of a sibling. And so um, I just put no thought into it beyond that. And it led to a lot of problems in it.
Yeah, specifically because it was female?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. I got a lot of, quote unquote, internet bros um, kind of doing a lot of weird things. Weird things as in, to give you an example, baiting me through DMs. Because the early period, I used to follow people,
Mhm.
like almost everyone. Um, and then, when you follow people, they can just, solicit you through DM. And so I'd get these. Um, it's really awful what some people do. I mean, Twitter can really get you depressed about
Yeah.
mankind or humankind. And so they would bait me, act interested. Hey, I really love what said about this. I couldn't agree more. Can you give me more details about it? And then it would end with like a nude picture or something, right?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
like, go suck this and, choke and die, or yeah. I mean, just awful stuff. And a lot of them are, just nameless, faceless people, but you'd be shocked at how many of the people that are out there kind of virtue signaling, and kind of the known poker players who have done that. So I blocked a lot of them, and people get surprised all the time. Why did you block this person? That person's great.
Mhm.
I've been a friend of theirs for a decade, or they give to charity, and they're this wonderful person. Oh yeah, let me show you what your wonderful person has done. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, that's a big one. The gender certainly caused a lot of problems. Um, I'm also politics wise, I don't really tweet about politics a
Mhm.
lot, maybe 5% of the time, if that. Um, but I'm a what people call a Eisenhower Republican, and so as I aged, I became more socially liberal, and I mean economically liberal and socially conservative. And so a lot of people early on mistook that for libertarian or conservative. And
Mhm.
so when I tweeted stuff, even when I disagreed with what I retweeted, it would attract like Trump supporters or diehard fringe conservatives or wackos. And so it creates a lot of that, because that's a lot of the reasoning behind why a lot of dummy accounts or nefarious bot accounts are named kind of under a woman's name, right?
Yeah.
um, they want to manipulate, and part of that formula is to make it appear as though women are saying pro male and anti female things and things like that. Um, so yeah, it was a mistake. I wish I could change it, but it's too late now, and so I've sort of doubled down and called it Rachel Lee's Things, and transferred over to my newsletter handle, which is the current one that you're looking at, which
Yeah.
is Rachel Lee's Things. Was something that I created as a secondary account just to post links to my long form articles, but now I use it exclusively and never log into my other one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's get into some of the things you wanted to talk about. So, I'm almost not sure where we start. Thinking for, do you have an idea of where you'd like to start? Just kind of with like an overall summary of of what you'd like to talk about, or do you think? I mean, I guess actually the first thing we could speak about is, kind of your motivations, um, generally, and your motivations for coming on to talk.
Yeah,
Do you want to start with discussing some of those?
sure. So I think I'd like to begin by being clear that I really care about three things when it comes to poker, and one is um, to better educate young people who don't know any better that there is an alternative way that you can incorporate poker into your life without bearing so much risk um, onto yourself. And so a lot of my writing is driven by that motivation to tell people, for example, when I say, everything you've heard is sort of the opposite of how things are. So, for example, taking on risk when you have little to lose,
Mm.
that's a fallacy or that's a myth, right? I'm a big believer that um, you do have a lot to risk because of the function or the effects of time on a life and a career.
Mm.
I also believe that little to lose has nothing to do with really money, but it has to do with equity, right? As poker players understand all too well, which is um, when you're young is when you need to build, right? The foundation, then a bedrock, and then that gives you the optionality to pursue other things should you choose. A lot of those choices are taken away if you do things in the wrong sequence. And so all I'm doing is not giving people a prescriptive kind of answer or telling them this is what you need to do. I'm just saying that you need to understand those other choices. And I came to this realization when I played actually a lot of limit poker at Bellagio and in LA card rooms where I would sit next to young poker pro in their early to mid 20s. And a lot of the games, would be shorthanded or kind of slow. And so they'd start talking to me. I think they're trying to profile me. Um, is this guy a whale or not? What have you? And so we get into a long, lengthy conversation, and it dawned on me that, um, wow, they really have things backwards, and they're really misinformed. I wonder why that is, and a lot of that happens because they're getting a one-dimensional input, right, from other people just like them who reinforce what they're feeling, right, which is um, this is going to be great. I need to do this. I have nothing to lose, and so on and so forth. So, to summarize, the first kind of motivation I had was really like, there are people who are just like the young me in my early 20s. But since I already traveled down that path, right, maybe not the same path as Phil Galfond or some other successful person, but a different path. And so I can share a lot of what I learned, both as a former poker player, full-time poker player, as well as a tech executive who has kind of tapped out and reached the peak and retired early. So that's one. Two is I think I will always be a player in some capacity and a fan.
Mhm.
I love poker, and so I wouldn't spend all this time just out of the goodness of my heart if I didn't love poker. So I certainly love poker, but so much of it is just going downhill. So much of it is wrong. So much of it is bad. And so I take an interest in the industry from a business standpoint because I understand the business better than the player, right? Um, so a consumer tech person would probably understand the user and player um, um, a lot more. in terms of persona and behaviors and triggers. I understand the operator side or the business side outside of poker, more broadly speaking. And so I take an interest in that. And I think a lot of the cures have to involve, but also kind of centrally start there with the operators. And so uh, when I write about businesses, yes, a lot of it is critical and sharp elbowed, but underneath the surface, I do really fundamentally believe that a lot is wrong with poker and has been for many decades, maybe half a century. But a lot of that has been changing, and I want to gradually, from this point forward, show them that progress is being made. Progress is slow, but it is being made. And anyone who has done this for 20, 30 years has, had a foot in the poker industry. I think will nod in agreement that progress has been made. It's just been damn slow. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is sort of, I guess, less interesting. But if you look at the typical poker player, they're doing so much more today, and so we get into the whole overlap, right? The skills you learn in poker, the skills that you acquire elsewhere. Um, those things do need to, like a system, feed on each other, right? If you spend time kind of just talking about it or hypothetically or theoretically thinking about it, but you don't actually act and apply it, you don't really reap any gains from it. And so I think you'll see a lot of tweets from me about seeing someone doing something phenomenal or fantastic in poker or a poker business or a poker role or job, and that really can be portable. You really can make a lot of money in a larger high growth industry, which is also, funny enough, one of the insights or kind of knowledge that I bring from tech in Silicon Valley is outside of some brilliant engineers and technical people that can truly invent the future, there's a lot of mediocrity and average people. They just work hard. And sometimes I see people in poker or through poker, and for lack of a better way to describe this, I just go like, and I'm sorry if I offend any of your listeners, but I just think, what a waste.
Sure.
What a waste. I mean, if I had this fella as my marketing head or sales head or partnership head or graphic designer or whatever, right? Or I had them as a colleague and a close peer, we could have done amazing things. So there's such great talent and intelligent people and good people in poker that I do think sometimes, like, what a waste. And the answer for a lot of them isn't to switch careers. For a lot of them, it's too late for that. There's too much equity built in to their life that they can't really afford to throw that away. And so, fortunately, I think the workplace landscape and the expectations of businesses have shifted again, progressed little by little to the point where you can really have dual careers, and that wasn't the case when I started out. When you said self-employed, you're really talking about freelancers that would get morsels, the crumbs of a budget from a company, outsourced, low-level, task-based, unimportant work. That's what freelancers ate off of. But today you can do entire, right, strategic and important things for people because it's sort of a new blueprint or model for how high growth, fast paced startups are being designed from the ground up. And so I think there's a great opportunity for people to be able to juggle both poker and traditional work.
Really,
It's
that's interesting. I mean, I know
yeah.
I've kind of tried to do that, but it's hard. It's interesting that so the
If I can just interject, if I can just interrupt
yeah
to give my color on that. So you've taken a big bite. I think that's the difference between you and maybe 1,000 other people. Um, I think what you've done is uncommon, which is, um, and I'll stroke your ego a little bit, but so in tech, in my career, if you're the top 15%, 20%, you're going to own 2.5 homes. You're going to have 3 cars. You're going to have 2 kids in college, well paid for. You'll take 2 vacations a year, and you're going to be very wealthy,
yeah
relatively speaking. You don't have to do that much. In poker, through attrition and survival, and just through the randomness of competition, right? Through multiple people to multiple people, hand-to-hand combat. The only people who really succeed in a big way is a really tiny number.
yeah
It's not like tech or traditional careers. It's like 1%, 2%. And in addition, they have to protect and guard themselves throughout that entire journey. You can't just be the biggest winner. You also have to have the most stable life. You have to have the most stable mental state. You have to have the right friends and surroundings, influences. You have to do so much more after you become successful. And so, what people typically do, the top 1% in any profession, is they want nothing to do with what they were involved with, right? So the most successful people are not the ones that are teaching people or writing books.
hmm
They're exhausted. They say, "Good riddance, guy. That's great. Like I don't want to regret my life, so I'm going to do some other stuff." And so they sort of disappear. And that's what happened with my bosses. I have numerous bosses that have made billions of dollars, multiple IPOs. They want nothing to do with tech. They want nothing to do with careers, whatever. I'm not like them. I'm a slightly above average person that is trying to help others. Um, so with you, what was interesting with you is you took that and then you kind of took a big bite. You may argue and you may be right, but I think you actually took a bigger bite in terms of like bigger, bolder ambitions.
yeah
And so, and then I don't think I don't know how you were in years past, but I think you still play a little bit. So your, interest and enthusiasm over playing hasn't really been stamped out. And so it's really hard to be an operator, a leader, a CEO of a big, of a big or small company with great ambitions. The important thing isn't size or scale. It's really the ambition, the weight of the ambition. And so the fact that you were doing stuff contrary to how it's always been done was a signal or evidence to me that wow, this guy is doing the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. He's really trying to lift the boulder up a monumental hill, and so. So I think so. I'm just saying I wasn't surprised that you struggled trying to juggle both things because one ball was this 10-ton you know wrecking ball, and the other was a golf ball.
sure yeah that makes a lot
Um,
of sense. To your earlier point, I do think you mentioned that in the tech world there are a lot of successful people who are mediocre and work hard. I think in poker, especially in this day and age, that doesn't work, and it's more about aptitude. But I think actually it's a career where if you have high aptitude and you don't work hard, um, you can do reasonably well. I mean, that was more the case when I started. But actually, that's what I wouldn't say that's what attracted me to it, but I was definitely in my early years relatively lazy, and poker
mm.
came easy to me. And a lot of my peers were the same
But
way.
do you think it came easy to you in spite of you being lazy, or maybe you're more talented or picked up on it quicker than others, and so you were able to afford being lazy. What is your assessment of that?
I think I think it's two things. I think one, it came easier to me than other people, and so I could afford to be lazy. But two, I found it so interesting that I actually, worked harder at poker than I did at anything else. It was still less than my peers in a lot of ways, but because it was so interesting to me, I had more motivation to learn than I did, let's say, in school.
Hmm. Yeah, I think what I've experienced with poker is that well, two things. The first aspect between non-poker jobs and businesses is that both deal with incomplete information, but in business, a lot of businesses, there are so many other uncontrollable factors, including things like, does your boss like you, and
Yeah,
you know, um, things that are qualitative in nature,
yeah.
where the feedback, really comes late. There's a lag. So there's a saying that, like, I think the average tenure of a CXO, especially something like a chief marketing officer in B2B at least, is about 18 months.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and the reason why is because the feedback lags. There's a latency of the feedback, and so you don't know after you onboard and kind of check for organ rejection. You also need to kind of see them produce over multiple quarters because of the sales cycle for B2B being, 6 to 8 months or more. Even SaaS, believe it or not, is not a monthly thing.
Hmm.
Revenue recognition and acquisition wise, it's a multiple quarter thing, and so you don't know if they're doing well or not. You know,
Yeah.
um, but you still have to pay them, right? A lot of money, and so you don't know if you're wasting this money, and you find out too late. And so 18 months, I think, is because it's in your second revenue year, and by that time you have no choice but to fire them. In poker, the feedback loop is almost too fast. You know,
Hmm.
um, it's hard for you to know if you should continue pursuing poker, whether you're winning or losing. You just have to keep playing, and so um, that could be very crushing. And the reason why I was thinking of this is that a lot of people say, well, survivorship, right?
Hmm.
That well, why did you continue playing poker? Well, because you were winning, you were doing good at it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that's necessarily true, because there are people who may do good at it, but their interest wanes.
Yeah.
Almost like if it's too easy, the interest can wane, or uh, decrease as much as when it's too hard. And so I'm not certain about that phenomenon. I think there are people who actually get more interested because it's difficult,
You
and
know,
vice versa.
I think I disagree just in that,
Hmm.
if you, it just because it kind of can't be too easy. There's no, like, unless you're in, a super soft game and it's the only game that you're going to play. Um, you just have so many losing sessions, even as a significant favorite, that it just never feels like predictable and easy.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I'm kind of suffering from short-term memory, because like, when I see people like sitting in a mid-stakes game
Hmm.
and putting in enormous amounts of hours to play a few hands in set mine, or just stack someone with the nuts, those people, quote unquote, easily can make 80 to 120K a year.
Yeah, that's fair.
And yeah, but why don't those people play for 10 years, 15 years? Um,
So
at some,
I
yeah,
I think the reason those people don't do it is because if you're somebody who loves the game and is competitive, you're not satisfied there, so you don't play that style. You try to max EV and you try to move up in stakes. But if you're content just kind of, you know, ticking the box of just playing nitty and playing the hands you're supposed to play, and you're doing it for the hourly, then you get bored.
So would you say then that more people who are mid stakes grinders or pros get disillusioned by poker than high stakes players or higher stakes pros? Because
It's a good question. I mean, I
yeah, I'm not sure.
I
I've seen a lot of people, say, "Is this all there is to it?" After they quote unquote reach the peak,
yeah, I think it's
as measured by stake.
okay. I mean, I think it's going to be correlation rather than causation, because I think the factor is their competitive drive and like enjoyment of the game, enjoyment of beating people at a game.
Hmm.
And so that, those people with more drive and more interest in the game for the game itself tend to have more success. And they tend to play a style that is not super ABC and nitty. And I think those are
Yeah.
people who can last longer because they're competitive. Like their competitive drive makes it fun and rewarding for them. And then there are people who found, they had a friend making money playing poker who said, "Hey, it's easy to just do this," and they got into it to make money, and they've come up with kind of a simple system that allows them to make money, and or whether it's strategy or they've gotten into a great game. um, and then that I feel like they could burn out more easily because, well, burnout's maybe the wrong word, because actually the former player is doing something more stressful and challenging, but they could just get bored.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Why did you ever? Were you ever a losing player? I mean, not at the beginning. Everyone reloads online or buys in and what have you. But I mean, like a real long stretch where you lost and you said, what am I doing?
I guess not really. I mean, I've had no, not really. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
for a year. I've probably had a year long downswing, but um,
So a person like you who has um, not really been punished by the game
mhm,
or the profession. I'm sure you've seen kind of the dark sides of it
yeah.
throughout your journey. But at what point, if any, did you decide? Because I understand the training thing, the business, the sharing of knowledge, giving back. I think that fills a lot of satisfaction holes
Mhm.
in any walk of life and profession. But what made you one day say this isn't enough, and start another business, the poker site?
It's a good question, and it wasn't extremely well thought out. I mean, well, first I'll give a disclaimer, so that, or not disclaimer, but anyways, you talked about some people who made it to the top of tech, and then they want nothing to do with it. I've been successful in poker, but I haven't been successful to that level, financially, where I have more money than I know what to do with. So there was always an element of, like I was trying to start businesses that I thought were plus EV and could add to my income and net worth, and that was still part of the motivation. Even in
Mm,
training, which is like I love teaching, but it was still a big part of the motivation is I think we could make a better training site, and I think we could do well, and that's a big part of it. So with the poker site specifically, it was around the time that PokerStars, after selling to Amaya,
mm,
was making some changes that actually made me fear for the future of online poker. Specifically, slashing rewards, but then also increase. There was a rise in game types that were super low edge. So obviously, spin and goes have been wildly successful, um, all around, but they came out with a format called Beat the Clock, which they no longer run, but it was just like I don't know, a 10-minute tournament where you then cashed out your chips. It was basically like a lot of things that were high rake and low edge, and I saw
yeah.
it becoming popular, and I was worried that, as they were essentially a monopoly at that point. I was worried that that's where the industry was heading, where poker would become like a poker themed casino where there are no winners. at all. And so
Yeah.
that worried me as a player. And then we had been successful with run at once training, and obviously it's a different business and kind of unrelated skill sets, but that combined with what gave me at least enough confidence to be like, you know what, maybe we could succeed in this area and try this and build something that would help preserve online poker in the way that I knew it and loved it. So that was the motivation, I guess, in short.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think what I'm hearing from you is what I heard from a lot of other startup founders, which is, um, they initially thought of it as an investment of time and money, but eventually um, it became more personal,
Mhm.
and that's what led them to kind of, quit high paying jobs or stop what they were doing and just put all in, so to speak,
Yeah.
into changing kind of what they thought needed change, and so that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that, going back some years to online poker,
Mhm.
um, you think that, and I don't really want to talk about, unless you do. I don't want to talk about, like, what caused the poker boom and all that. I think, in general, business cycles have boom cycles and bust cycles, and that's how things just generally work with the economy and with businesses. But um, so I don't want to get into the causes of the boom, but do you think the functional role that online poker served in the past, was it a gateway drug or was it a lead gen? So meaning a lead gen would be, did online poker pull in or bring in people who otherwise may have not played poker? So did it create net new customers, first time customers? Or did online poker take an existing group of people who play poker or were gamblers and would most likely play poker, and did they give them marijuana to the meth or cocaine that would be live poker or something like that? What was it, a gateway drug or lead gen?
I guess I feel like it was both. People who, I mean, for so many people, so many of my peers and myself, I was interested in gambling. I played poker a little bit with friends. I watched it on TV. Uh, but I mean, I wasn't gonna go to travel to casinos to play. Like, I don't know. It was in the convenience of my dorm room. I was able to just play, and so I think it was, yeah, for a lot of people that would have played if they had a poker room, next door. It became a
Hmm.
poker room next door. And then for people who already did play, it was also a more convenient way to play, and put in more hands and generate more revenue from those players. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, because I think it's fundamental to any discussions over, how do we grow poker or how will poker grow or decline, is you really need to, does online, because the elephant in the room, obviously, that we haven't talked about yet is, all of the rampant cheating and all of that online.
Yeah.
And the I think people sort of jump to conclusions there in terms of, like, how damaging it is. But a small step before that would be, does it even matter? And does it even matter kind of gets us to that question that you addressed now, which is it a lead gen or is it a gateway? Because, a gateway just, right, is has different output, different ends, right? It means stickiness, it means lifetime of playing, loyalty, steady, reliable revenue streams. It's very optimized for kind of cash cow big markets, incumbent legacy type of organizations or operators,
Yeah.
right? Because you're monetizing them after you kind of, give them the easy marijuana,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to kill them. You want to move them to the cocaine. And apologies if any of the listeners are um, suffering from drugs or know of people suffering drugs. I just couldn't find a better analogous situation.
I understand.
Um, yeah, and if you treat it as a demand gen, that's a whole nother story, right? That's basically you're saying that growth with brick and mortar and growth with live casinos and card rooms is not going to be enough, is not going to be adequate,
Yeah.
and so you basically need more people, and so um, you really do need to use online as a demand gen. And then the key question then is like, and this is this whole Sheldon Adelson
Mhm.
and Indian tribe thing, right? Which is um, where are the synergies? Because they viewed zero sum, online is taking away business from live.
Right.
We need to shut them out. And they didn't even stop there. It wasn't just a matter of a live casino versus online casino. It had to do with other forms of gambling. So their lobbyists were not just knee deep with, poker or blackjack, but also with, sports betting, racetracks, lotteries, all forms of gambling. And um, so I just thought about this because all the rage right now is about cheating and what's cheating, what's not cheating, which is more harmful, which is not, which is less harmful, which will risk the growth of poker in the future or not, just a lot of that stuff. And I think we need to pause and ask ourselves, does it matter? um, I'm inclined to say yes, obviously, because I tend to view um, online poker as a lead gen,
Mm.
even if there are people like you who would never play live or intend to play live. You just like the convenience and easy access of playing in your pajamas and you know working with a screen. So a portion of new players will never play live and enlarge in the you know global pot. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people. Uh, I don't feel they're doing the same thing. I feel that a lot of them, and we can get into problem gambling and stuff, but they're sort of in just telling you what you already know, but they're doing the opposite of what you attempted with your site, which is, and I've written even this morning about it and other days, but they're really um, turning people, they're holding people hostage is kind of the way I'd put it. Um, they're creating games to make people addicted. They're
Mhm.
making it difficult for people to make responsible decisions. Um, and so, what I tweeted today, and tell me if you agree with this, is because it's not immediately intuitive,
Mm.
but the best thing that can happen for online poker or any form of poker is for a lot of people to be break even.
Yeah.
Yeah, the max break even, and there are multiple ways that you can reach that end state. Um, you can do it through trickery. You can do it through incentivizing more deposits with bonuses. You can do it through a lot of the tried and true ways, which I don't always agree are the right ways. But you can also do it with kind of some of the stuff that you have tried and others have attempted, which unfortunately in the short run isn't as effective because the user base is, conditioned and primed already to
Right.
expect to be mistreated. So I used to read some 2+2 threads where people are criticizing sites like Run It Up, Run It Once, and saying that, well, you haven't done this and everybody expects this. Well, everybody is held hostage to, and they're cocaine addicts, right? So they want things that the provider has always given you. And so if you suddenly go from that to eating something that's pure, it's not going to taste good.
Yeah.
So you have to eat what is healthy for you for a long time for you to now be readjusted to the normal way, normal thing, the healthy thing, the less dangerous thing, And so, but I'm but a pea in a large ocean, and so I wish that more influencers and more people with platforms would talk about this stuff. It's not as exciting. It's almost academic and kind of, classroom like. And people prefer, emotionally charged, things, right? Like Bryn Kenny is a cheater, ghosting, he's a cheater. We should ban him. Let's get a blacklist. Who's going to be on this council? And I'm just sitting there shaking my head going, wow, a lot of these people are the same people who claim that there's no progress being made to improve poker, to improve the industry, and they don't even know that they're the cause. They're central to the reason why there's inertia, why nothing's changed. And so I think if you were to poll your training site customers, I guess they're different because they're a lot more advanced and experienced. But I wonder what would happen if you put up a poll and put up those options, right? Which is long term, how does the poker economy and the player pool and ecosystem grow in a healthy, sustainable way? And one of the options is, maximize breaking even players, and put another one as, introduce more luck in the game. The other one is, celebrate or celebrate the best of the best. And you put these different options, and I guarantee you, with near certainty, that a lot of people think they're sort of one and the same, right? Meaning, the way you create break even, right, is through incorporating more luck in the game, because this is how people like Daniel Negreanu, who is a heavily listened to voice, thinks and talks, and I think he really believes it, and because I don't think he's had fundamental kind of experience and training with just business fundamentals, right? So he really thinks yeah, if you make it more luck based, it's going to grow, because we're going to get more rec players, and rec players have disposable income from outside of the player pool, outside of the ecosystem, so they bring in new money. No, it just means you kill people faster. You still are going to have the same age old problems that businesses have, right? Which is repeat purchases, which is longer hours. You still have the LTV or lifetime value problem. You still have a churn problem. You still have all these other problems. They don't go away. So there are other ways you can ensure that people are, more break even. One of which is probably controversial, but the multi-tabling reduction, I think, is a good move.
Yeah.
You agree with that, right?
I do. Yeah. And I mean, but it's so, I do.
It's so hard to do.
It's so hard to do because, first of all, everybody's upset about it. Second of all, if you're not basically you sacrifice a lot of traffic and liquidity, which liquidity is king. Especially if you're, entering small markets like the US, or you're starting a startup like we did in the rest of world market. You're just, cutting off your legs to, if you don't let people fill up your games by multi-tabling. But I mean, that was so we launched. I think we launched with a 4-table cap and increased it to a 6, just because we needed the players. But yeah, I think reducing it even further is probably what's best, for the game and longevity of the game and the experience of the recreational player, which then leads to more redeposits.
Right. And you did it at a time when the landscape was much lesser affected by bots.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now, so if you look ahead the next 5 years, 10 years, what have you, the two will converge to the point where by allowing many tables, right, to be played at once,
Mm-hmm.
you're taking away from the rec player the casual player, right?
Yeah.
Your future cream of the crop, kind of the gold mine, and you're putting arms into the mercenary, the bad guy, who can now. I hate this phrase because it's used by nerds online, but you're weaponizing them. You're just saying, okay, because today, people say, where's cheating happening? Cheating is happening everywhere. I hate these people who argue, and you should speak to this since you know 10 times more than us because you operated a site. But they don't just happen at high stakes or low stakes or mid stakes or MTTs or sit and goes or cash games. They happen everywhere. That's how cheating happens in businesses too, right? Which is uh, different formats present a different kind of detection and punishment profile. So like their goal is to be everywhere at once so that they can learn where it works the best. But it doesn't mean they take their hands off of other formats or what have you. They're everywhere, and they will keep cheating until they're detected. And since the rate of detection in security, we used to always say it's like, they're not going to spend money on evasion. They're going to spend money on reach.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at kind of the early botnet kind of systems that proliferated in the early 2000s, when people up until then didn't know anything about botnets. They talked about viruses and localized malware, hijackings and stuff like that. But in the early 2000s was when botnets exploded. They started popping up in bulletin boards and IRCs. They were being sold in underground kind of sites, and that's basically the lesson I learned through helping build technologies to fight these guys. And we worked with the CIA and FBI and all that, but government agencies and nation states. But they spend all of their time basically with the assumption that they are going to get caught. So this notion that they're like, doing things to prevent getting caught, and that's sort of faulty. What they do is their economics is based on getting caught, so we need to continue to reach more and more. We need to increase our footprint, not reduce it. So this notion that like botnets are going to isolate themselves into the least detectable kind of areas of the poker environment is sort of it doesn't kind of ring with me. So I would say to you, or ask of you, because I think a reader, Twitter person, asked, but where are those lines for you in terms of like, what is the cheating method that is absolutely in your mind threatening the future of online poker versus what are some mid-level kind of cheating schemes that we can mitigate or reduce a little bit? And then what are the cheating kind of methods that in your mind, although you don't like it, it's kind of like, there's nothing we can really do about it. Um,
Yeah.
because for me, ghosting would be in that third category, which is ghosting has always been around since the late 90s, since the first versions, right? Version 0.5 of online poker. Um,
Yeah. So I
so
think,
what would be your one, two, three?
I mean, so my sliding scale of what, the worst types of cheating are to the least bad are essentially, it's correlated with edge and like beatability. So, if you're playing against somebody who is RTAing or botting with, an unexploitable optimal strategy, then that's unbeatable. And actually, even worse than that is if you're playing against somebody on an eight-handed table who has five of the
They,
accounts, that's even
yeah,
less beatable, and takes more.
because, but they provide liquidity.
Well, I mean, if you're on a single table and eight of the five players are controlled by one person,
Oh, I see. I see.
yeah, then
So it's sort of like even if they don't try to collude, they're colluding, sort of,
yeah,
right?
I mean they're if they have five people on the eight-handed table, they're colluding.
Yeah.
So I think those are
Well, I meant, bots. Like you have a botnet, I have a botnet,
okay. Yeah,
and then we accidentally end up in the same tables because, right, you're playing 30 tables, I'm playing 20 tables, and, they're bots, but you and I aren't explicitly colluding. I don't even know you.
yeah. Then
But
that's
yeah,
yeah, that's just the same as botting to me. But
I
I'm talking
see.
about,
I
so
see.
like I know that the some of the GG bans and people who are being talked about there, some was I don't know exactly who was doing what, but I know that there was, you know multiple accounts in the same, like, 30 player tournament, uh,
I see.
and those are that's a way to gain a very big edge, colluding with yourself essentially. I do feel compelled to, maybe just feel compelled to pause and talk about cheating on the whole. And
Mm.
I think that cheating of some kind, it depends where we draw the line, but cheating of some kind has been going on for a long time. Obviously, and it basically has always been happening to some degree. I don't feel like so here's how I feel. I think 10 years ago, there were bots capable of beating, let's call it mid stakes MTTs. Uh, and I don't feel like basically, as you're a good person to ask about this, but as technology is progressing, I feel like the bot situation is, if it hasn't already, on a trajectory to improve, because bots like optimal play, or winning play by a bot have been around for a long time. Yet, with the progression of technology, detection gets better. And my understanding is, for a site like, I've heard numbers, or actually PokerStars posted numbers at some point, that like 95, 96% of their cheaters were caught by them internally, not by suggestions and tips from the public. So that gives you an
Yeah.
idea of, the level of scale that they're catching internally already. My understanding is that a bot ring of, let's call it 30 accounts, those are significantly easier to catch than, let's say, one high stakes player using RTA. Like world different, because the bot ring is going to have accounts playing similar strategies, presumably. They're also going to have some patterns in some way, whether it be, you can look into their digital footprint, but and like, obviously they can obfuscate their IP and things like that, but you can find some things to look for, some elements of the programs they run on their computer, and then also, they have to fund their accounts and they have to cash out. So find some patterns in how they're creating identities and funding accounts and cashing out, and the financial institutions they use. So my understanding is that while those have always been a threat, and they still are absolutely a threat, I don't think it's as widespread and kind of relentless as as a listener might feel you implied.
Yeah. So for the most part, I would agree with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the current state of things. My knowledge of things go back to when I was in the industry, the tech industry. And so one of the things that I was keen on learning more about, just because of my personal interest in poker, is kind of how it works in the gaming industry. I worked with a lot of servers and helped build a lot of the data center, including Google. I was one of, a couple hundred people, obviously. So I have a deep interest in that space. And one of the things we learned was that, or I learned, is that in the beginning, so the way a bot works is, or a botnet in this case, command and control, is it works through obfuscation. So kind of um, it's a machine, with a human behind it,
Mm-hmm.
but largely it does its bad deeds by fooling people, right? Fooling businesses up, and what have you. And we saw this in the financial markets um, uh, a lot sooner than something like poker. There's just not enough money in poker. So most of the organized crimes and syndicates from Eastern Europe, using Russian former, KGB hackers and whatnot, they went after the financial sector. And that's sort of how they operated. So they're very rules based. So similar to a router switch, a controller, you put in rules and they can only do the rules. So there's a very much of a cap, right? There's a limit to
Mm-hmm.
how much damage they can do, because they cap out rather quickly. And so you had to do things in volume, which is why they sold large pre-built botnets of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. And this is all published, right? This is all available through Google. You can go see botnets that were captured. They hijack, tens of thousands of unknowing computers, unknowing devices. And so the bad guy is not enrolling or enlisting innocent people and using their resources to do the bad deed. So there's a cap to that. The second wave of botnet usage, and one we've also seen in online poker, I think there's a media site in poker that actually talked about this, is um, they started to do social engineering, so the human element. So they went and you can go to poor countries and pay them 200, $300 to let them lease their identities to you.
Yeah.
And so through structure of technology and the um, borderless nature of technology deployment, you no longer have to rely on obfuscation, meaning IP masking, DNX proxy redirects, um, filtering. You don't have to do this trickery, because at the end of a connection, at the endpoint is a real identity, a real person. So it raised the ceiling or the cap a little bit more, because that's more, what should I say, safer for the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the unintended consequence of that is that it made it easier, because it wasn't based primarily on technology schemes, techniques, but it was kind of a human fraud, human kind of cheating. It made it easier for sites like PokerStars and others, and I'm sure if you talk to their security teams, they would tell you, but the way they catch most of these people is not necessarily through pattern matching or gotchas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we see that this IP is being rerouted and going through multiple hops, but it belongs in this regional zone of a telco or a GI firewall. And so, yeah, now I nabbed you. It doesn't happen that way. Most of the captures, detection and captures, occur because of mistakes that the humans make with a human identity. So things like you sign up, a new player signs up using a made up, brand new email. and then now the security team can actually do forensics on the email and go and see if there's any kind of footprint on the internet in terms of this new account. And believe it or not, the alarms go off, the positives, right, go up if that new account, say Rachel Lee's at AOL.com, suddenly has a lot of activity, right?
Yeah.
On the internet.
Yeah.
That actually increases the grade. And so then they pry into that, and then they do challenges, right? Handshake challenges, identity challenges, AAA challenges. And that's how they kind of find them for the most part. And then there are advanced techniques beyond that, which does do kind of heuristics and kind of evaluation and analysis of the play, correlate that or tie that back to previous accounts that were banned, and then you can kind of cross-pollinate the two databases and say the likelihood of this being a repeat offender is very high. This is a cheater that has been banned before, and so you kind of clean the user base that way, the database that way. So I agree with you from the standpoint of, yes, I think there is some exaggeration for sure. Because from each generation to generation, you're not like seeing 10 botnet ringleaders increase to now, like 5 years later, now we see 30, right?
Yeah.
I think the bad guys are relatively static. It's just a matter of kind of how bold they become and how widespread their activities become. And so I agree with you in the sense that it's a lot more contained than people think if you think of things in current and past terms. And this is my fault for having a tendency to project out and kind of pontificate on the future possibilities, which is often wrong because you can't really predict behavior, right? But if I just look at where the technology is going, if you look at, and by the way, a few years ago, just out of for fun, some friends and I played around with virtual machines and things like that. There were a lot of packages out there for kind of how to build a botnet, but in the past, you would download something, you would get cobbled together some machines, you would have to resolve the payment system for the cashing out, the identity to register and all that, and then let the machine run. And the machine, right, is this elementary kind of slow crawling thing. So then you make a little chunk of money. As botnets have advanced, now you couple, basically it's a payload, right? A botnet is a payload. It's not an app. People keep talking about it as though it's an app or a tool. No, it's a payload. It carries an app. And that app in the past used to be rudimentary. It used to be, as you called it, very elementary. It used to be just do this, do that, right? Very rule-based. It's as strong and as deadly as the rule itself. And so the rules, much like poker knowledge, has really advanced. The state of art in poker has really accelerated. And so today, when you look at things like solvers, I don't know much about solvers, but they're what I call their processing. So the big difference is, solvers are processors. They generate answers versus follow directions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so these are that's a whole new level of cheating. So that's how I kind of frame things, which is pre-flop charts or other tools. It's not a matter of dynamic or not. People keep saying dynamic, not dynamic. This is just a chart. This is actually taking inputs. It's not a matter of dynamic. It is a matter of, is it generating? Is it modifying? Is it self-learning?
Gotcha.
And so technology is at a point where outside of poker, machine learning has been going on for a decade now. And you see it in IoT devices, you see it in beacon devices, you see it in cars. It's learning. So what happens to that learning? What happens because the advanced botnets today are not just outputting, they're inputting, right? They're collecting information about everything, about a site, its users, about patterns and statistics. So someone at some point can convert that or translate that into the third generation of bots. And when it comes to cheating, my assumption is that when something can be done, it will be done. And so I'm a lot less. I'm a lot more bearish on the future. But on the other hand, how I think that you can overcome that, right? That inevitability is by growing poker. So the best way to minimize the botnets isn't to be perfect or to eliminate 96% of them. It's to make them a smaller percentage of the overall whole. And because you need poker to grow massively in order to get the money to reinvest into security to get rid of those
Yeah.
things. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So that's the formula.
Yeah, I agree. Growing. I mean, growing, and probably I agree. Growing is the
That's the only way.
yeah.
There's not enough capital to go after and make a dent in the cheating unless you're able to reinvest, income and turn a big portion of your income into operating expense, right? So OpEx, cash.
Mhm.
You need the cash, and that'll attract better white hats. That'll attract better forensic engineering. That'll be able to purchase larger technology farms and keep that cheating at bay. Um,
So one interesting element, and this kind of segues into, I'm curious to talk to you about just poker and business in general. The
yeah.
the sites. So other than PokerStars, which was poker only, and actually GG, most
Mm.
poker platforms, um, are belong to a company that has a suite of products, including casino and sportsbook. And this is the model that as poker becomes legal in more and more states in the U.S., these casinos and sportsbooks are all looking to add poker platforms, and that's how we at Run It Once are on our way to the U.S. In Again, not for PokerStars, probably not for GG, but in all of these cases, poker ends up making up a small fraction of the revenue that a company brings in, something like sub 5%, maybe as low as 1 or 2%. And the reason it's there for them is acquisition and retention, because obviously if one of your casino players wants to play poker and can't do it on your site, they're going to go somewhere else and probably use their casino just out of simplicity. And so I wonder if even if poker in the States doesn't grow large enough to on its own generate the revenue that helps combat these issues, if the companies on a whole are doing so well and are generating so much revenue that the investment in poker, despite like the fact that you don't necessarily see the return on the poker revenue itself, the investment in poker and the investment in having the poker site that everybody considers safest or one of the safest and the best experiences becomes worth it, because then they don't make the revenue directly from poker but from acquisition and retention, and converting other sites sportsbook players to their own.
Yeah. So I think that will happen. I'm just pausing because I'm thinking it through. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I think so. The way I am thinking of things is, the age old cash cow versus star versus unknown versus dying products, which is a typical way that companies tend to allocate its resources, money, and effort. So poker being kind of low on the priorities list, so it's it's not generating. It's very hard for a CEO to take money from the cash cow or star, a growth product, and put it into you know the an unknown or dying product,
Mm-hmm.
because you're shifting resources away and thus stunting the growth. You're sort of harming yourself.
Yeah.
Now, where I struggle with this, and why I pause, and you give me your take, but what's interesting about the scenario you described is that, like, ultimately the customer for these four products, right? Um, it's the same customer. It's one account.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to keep that one account and profit from that one account for as long as possible, um, you would need to make the environment safe for that one account.
Yeah.
And so I think almost not intentionally, but as an outgrowth of your um, greed to make as much money as you can from that one account, you're going to end up with operators, yes, as you said, cleaning things up and actually putting money into fighting the cheating problem in a small corner of their business. But I don't think it will be deliberate. I don't think a CEO will, in a QBR, sit there, look at reams of data and say, you know what? Um, it's just good business to kind of put some more money this quarter or this year into this area. Um, I don't think that's going to happen. But if what could happen is if within that portfolio of four offerings, poker does grow, and if it grows, then it'll be worth it. So it won't be a free rider, right?
Right.
Issue. It is going to get dedicated funds directed at it. Now, um, poker, like if you look at the classic kind of point product versus solution, multiple products tied together, kind of with wraps and bow ties, and then the natural, ideals, thing being a platform being extensible. If you look at what the gaming or gambling sites are doing today, it is in that mid stage of solutions. So this notion of cross traffic, and the whole is larger than the sum of its parts thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this notion that, like, if we attach poker into a sports betting site, the sports gamblers are going to spend money on poker. I don't believe that for a second, at least not now. um, of course there's some of it, but I'm just saying it's not material, it's not meaningful.
Yeah. For
um,
what it's worth, I don't think they're thinking that they're going to tack on poker and add much revenue from poker and lower
oh, I
their
see.
their LTV. I think they're thinking that through poker we retain more players, if because so that our players don't go elsewhere to a competitor that has poker, and also through poker we can acquire customers for lower cost because
Easily.
poker keywords and other ways to
I
advertise poker.
see.
Yeah.
So they're looking at poker not to drive or pull money, but just as a quick and easy turnkey, like um, acquisition. Basically, the same reason why company A buys company B, to buy its customers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not because they want to integrate that company B's product into company's A product to charge $2 million instead of $200,000. So I see what you're saying. Okay, that makes more sense then. Now, I'm a lot clearer in terms of what it is they're up to. That would make a lot of sense, um, to be able to just increase the user count
Yeah.
overall. Because yeah, but there is an opportunity, whether from today's vendors or operators or tomorrow's vendors, that the the site can become a platform and be extensible. So um, I don't, by extensible, I mean just like all platforms, it will be able to attach or um, tie into other stuff that has nothing to do with gambling.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, gaming right now is treated quite separately.
Hmm.
E-gaming.
Yeah.
And I tweeted about this too, but I have a funny story where I was helping some founders pitch an idea for poker. It had to do with like sponsorships and kind of, it was more of an ad company than a
Mhm.
poker site, but the model was completely different. And a few VCs, top tier VCs in the valley, were interested, but they basically said that their hands are tied, because a lot of the sovereign states and outside of pension funds and institutional investors, a lot of these large funds, when you get into the half billion to larger, have the Saudis or other kind of, nations,
Hmm.
sovereign money. And as part of the LP agreement, they can't touch gambling.
Yeah.
And so they consider e-games as play, like even though it involves virtual currency and real money, they consider it non-gambling.
Okay.
And then poker, goes into gambling. And so at some point, I believe at least that wall will go away, and e-gaming and the gambling that we know today, I think, merges, and that turns the solution, right, point product solution platform, that turns the solution into a platform.
Yeah.
And once that turns into a platform, you can only imagine how big this thing gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets way beyond social kind of stigmas and religious or political or community based arguments about whether it's safe or not. It just becomes a part of life, and when it becomes a part of life, is actually, I think, the problem gambling and all of that gets better addressed. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to funding. Everything comes down to will, you know. Um, and so, oddly enough, that's what was swimming through my head when I was watching, um, the streamers playing on the poker live stream,
Yeah.
Hustler, I think. Not, I think, I know. Um, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking this is the first kind of, not inning, but the first at bat in the first inning
Yeah.
of the game that's to come, which is this convergence of the two worlds.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's for the vast majority of the public, it's a form of leisure, it's a form of recreation, it's a form of fun, it's a form of passing the time. And so, I think, what's his name? The blue-haired guy, Ninja.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ninja said in one clip that I saw that he played poker before, but lost interest in it, became a gamer, but now he's finding renewed enthusiasm for poker.
Yeah.
And so he's a lab study for um, a marketer who wants to understand the psychology of e-gaming versus poker,
Yeah.
kind of what are the similarities, what are the differences, what pushed them in one direction versus not another. Because a lot of people like Ike Caxton, who I like a lot too, my understanding is they were Magic the Gathering, card players, and then poker kind of, right, was a natural transition to make because the money was in poker.
Yeah.
um, I don't think they transitioned or moved into poker because they love poker. It's a better game, and I think they love games, but at some point in their life, they go like, "How do I want to spend my scarcest asset, which is time?"
Yeah.
And they go, "Well, I'm gonna direct it here."
Play the game
Um,
where I can make money rather than the game where
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. So that's an area that I find very interesting as a person who, with a lot less, background and knowledge. Is a lot of people like yourself and others who have been in poker a long time. They're more the way they think, it's more about behavioral, and kind of psychology. Um, and then kind of the world I came from is more process orientation and frameworks and stuff like that. Kind of, um, yeah. So I don't know where I was going with that.
Well,
Um,
I'll take it somewhere different. So you earlier mentioned, we're not going to get into you didn't want to get into, like how the poker boom started, and I don't really either because I don't know the answer. But the the kind of poker bust, I think, was precipitated by, Black Friday, and
mm,
really the money leaving advertising for televised poker. We lost a lot of televised poker after Black Friday, at least in the U.S., and I think that elsewhere as well, but especially in the U.S. Um, and I think with more and more states, I really do believe more and more states are coming, and I think that a lot of big companies, not only the Poker Stars and the GGs, but the big U.S. companies, that are not poker specific now, will get into poker. I think there's going to be that money once again for marketing, advertising on poker streams, on poker on TV. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, where poker entertainment goes, because we're in a different world than we were back on Black Friday. There streams all the time on YouTube, on Twitch, that didn't exist then. Now a lot of our poker content, that would have been on TV in the past is on Poker Go, which is paywalled. Not that TV wasn't, but in a different way. I'm
mm.
I, I'm curious. I don't know where poker on TV is going, but I think there's going to be more funding behind it soon, and I'm curious where that takes us, and where it does take us, and then where maybe it should, or what poker needs to do to recapture the eyes and the hearts of the market.
Yeah. Well, so so all of that is an accurate depiction of what transpired.
Mhm.
Um, Certainly, the poker companies themselves were buying airtime and producing reels and producing these shows.
Yeah.
Um, I think the challenge from an advertising standpoint that poker always runs into is, um, consumer laws, right? So, just like cigarettes, it belongs in a regulated, part of the economy, and so there are some limitations to what you can and can't do. And so that just by definition reduces the reach of the ad. And so, um, for example, I mean, an easy example is you can't advertise Poker Stars on ABC, midday to the soap opera watching audience.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Um,
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I don't believe so. A reader can correct me, but it's been a
Mhm.
while since I read into the laws. But I don't think you can do anything you want like that. Um, Now, um, I think in terms of the nature of the message changing, yes, I think the nature of the messaging needs to change and will change, which is if you think back to kind of the poker boom, um, anyone can get rich doing this, is a very much of a um, semi lottery like message.
Yeah.
Like, look at this person. So, but I think the messaging over the years kind of naturally shifted. Um, and I'm not talking about kind of the skill based versus luck based,
Mhm.
which I think was a mistake too, by the way, for all that's worth. The whole Poker Player Alliance trying to differentiate poker into its own island and separating itself from what really had momentum, which was overall gambling, kind of
Yeah.
sports betting and the like. They should have just piggybacked onto that much larger, heavily funded kind of effort. But anyways, so I'm not talking about skill based versus chance based or anything of the sort. It's just kind of Instead of, get rich quick kind of messaging, I think the messaging as you reach a more mainstream audience has to be about leisure. Like, why is poker better than fishing? Like, it has to have a more intrinsically kind of rewarding message into it versus materialistic, extrinsically, feelable kind of, you know what I mean? It's like,
I know what you mean. It strikes it. It doesn't seem right to me just because of, I don't know, people. People.
it's harder to do. That's
Yeah,
what you're struggling with right now, as I do, which is it's the harder path to take,
yeah,
certainly, right?
yeah,
The way marketing works today is, short attention span, in your face, right? Make a promise quickly, capture them in your net and do your thing. So that's not just in poker, but it's just in, B2B, B2C, B2B2C, everywhere.
yeah.
But um, but the thing is, if you believe the premise that the bulk of the growth and money going forward is going to come from a generation of players who have high income, high net worth, high income, a lot of disposable income,
Hmm.
and the time, right?
Yeah.
And the time, and not from the young, kid who's finished with school or working in year two of their like a job they hate. If you believe that premise, that that audience is not looking to get rich.
That's fair. Yeah.
I mean, not in the same way, at
Yeah.
least,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah, most of them don't even buy lottery tickets. So that's a crowd that's more going to be affected by the messaging that comes from training sites more so than from mass media, or you know what I mean, or
So,
like
so do you think it's unique to poker? Like, would you recommend the same thing to an online sports book,
sports book. I think.
or maybe casino is a better analogy, or
Yeah, sports book. I'm not sure because I don't know about you or others, but I bet, and it makes the whole sporting experience, the viewing experience enhanced.
yeah,
I'm not really trying to win money or get rich or anything with sports betting. It's fun.
yeah,
It's the sweat. With poker, like I think what lacks and what is sort of there through the tournaments versus cash game is the leaderboarding,
yeah,
the ranking, the stature, the reputation, the the whole saying, when you're leading a company and you've had employees and people working for you, you've had a team.
mhm,
Money goes only so far, right? At the end of the day, money goes to a certain point, and then they need recognition. They need others to recognize them, to appreciate them for the amount of toil and blood and sweat and effort they put into something. So, half of it is paid for through monetary rewards. The other half is through social rewards, through recognition. And poker, because of the way it functions, is like it's the opposite. You don't want people to know. You're secretive. You don't want people to. So you sort of like miss out on this whole behavior of like people getting deeper and deeper and more into it because of the whole lack of gamification, if you will.
sure,
Like, I've played in a few tournaments, not a lot, but I never thought of like, well, yeah, if I win, I win 200K. If I final table, it's 38K. If
right,
I cash, I don't think that way, right? Um, I want to advance. I want to see myself get further this time than last time. I want to make day two. I want to make day three. I want to, I want to finish ahead of my best buddy,
yeah,
like who I know I'm better than. Like you have these goals that need to be given through dashboarding. And poker severely lacks dashboarding, leaderboarding. So, like, if you go into for example, here's a great, I don't know if it's a great example, but if you look at a player card at a brick and mortar casino,
Yeah.
it's awful, right? So it's not even like Las Vegas strip casinos where they have different color cards.
Mhm.
Everybody gets the same card, and why do they all get a card? It's so that they can track your play and give you rate back.
Yeah.
So everyone's treated the same. When everyone's treated the same, there's just a limit to how interested one can get.
I understand.
So yeah, you have to, I think, tier those things. And online sites, I think, did a great job of that very early on through rewards and all that, which again, Negrano shed on. I don't think, I'm just half joking. I don't think it was his decision to take away.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's I think poker needs to incorporate that. So it's not so much a contest between tournaments versus cash. It's more both. You know, both should have as much um, leaderboarding. So, for example, like you have the Hendon mob,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody tirelessly, year after year, they talk about just, oh, you don't know if they're a net lifetime winner. These don't count the buy-ins.
Sure.
They just, I think, miss the point, right? Which is, you go to any new poker player, like the minute they show up and their results show up there, they're so happy.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so happy. A lot of them actually don't tell you how gleeful they are, but they're really happy. They're just ecstatic. And so it's the same concept that you can actually take through the player card in a live casino for cash games. So you don't want them through the smartphone or an app. You don't want to show them kind of their like accruing lifetime losses or wins,
Mhm.
right? I think that's the last thing you want to do to retain customers. I get it. But there are other data sets that you can reveal to them that makes them feel like they're earning points,
Yeah.
right?
That
Not
makes
just
sense.
for rake back, which is like, you can show them those, how many pots they've played, how many pots they've won. People like data when it comes to winning.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if they're net losing. Most people expect to lose. Not the pros who are
Yeah.
doing it for a living, but you know what I mean? And so I think those experimentations are not happening because the ideas are not being generated or they're dying on the grapevine. They're just being stamped out because too many people in the poker industry believe that nothing's broken, so why fix it? And a lot of these people who are employees are not going to lift a finger, right? They just want to save their salary and their job.
Right.
They're not going to rock the boat.
Yeah.
So what has to happen is change has to come from the people who are starting businesses, even little ones. Change has to come from people like that. So I love this trend of people who are who have been generating user generated content, like the Andrew Nemes of the world or whoever, Brad Owen, and they're getting more ambitious. They're going from how do I make extra bucks to then they went through, oh, I could actually make a full-time living doing this, to now I think they're getting more ambitious, and so their voices are increasingly going to over time become less about me, how do I make more money for myself through um, WT PT is going to pay me X number of dollars a year for
Yeah.
being a mouthpiece or whatever, but soon they will be able to affect the decisions that PT makes, and that's exciting if it happens. And so
Yeah.
the more small businesses that can be created and supported, the better off I think everyone will be, because those are the ones who are going to foster new ideas and actually experiment out of sometimes sheer desperation, out of curiosity, But yeah, these incumbent legacy establishments that have been around for many decades, their owners are off like on a yacht. They don't care,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They don't care. They just get the quarterly and annual distributions of profit. They just want things to stay where they are because they're getting older each year and they're going to die. So they're thinking more about death, not how to improve or grow poker.
Yeah.
And do you think the people who work for them, the general managers and the executives, care? No. They're online giving head fakes and acting like they care, but you can see it in the actions. They don't budge. They don't change a thing. And so the poker players, of which the pros are probably just a small fraction, but the most vocal, the poker players right now aren't being vocal. They're the only way you can change that is to make them feel like they should be heard,
Yeah.
that people will listen, and I think that's where a training site, although it wasn't designed for that, it plays that role in a way, because what does a training site do ultimately? It helps people be self-sustaining. It helps protect people by improving their game, improving their performance. It teaches them, right, everything inside and outside the game. It gives them confidence, right, knowledge, so that knowledgeable people talk, right. People who feel they're not knowledgeable are afraid to talk because they're afraid to be criticized and whatnot. And so poker training sites, in a way, kind of are creating a generation of these people that in the future will be the difference makers. Am I getting too excited, Phil?
No, I like it.
I get charged up. I go up and down. And it takes effort sometimes not to get too down or too up.
Sure.
I was always this way with my startups too. But
Yeah.
yeah, at the end of the day, the last chapters always ends up, just like the business cycle, right?
Yeah.
Prosperity followed by a deep downturn, followed by recovery, followed by transition into the next beginning of the next business cycle. That's how my emotions kind of run.
Yeah.
And so for any listeners of Phil's podcast, if I've ever upset you or triggered you, please give me a temporary pass and try me out for the long term, because I don't mean to upset people or beat up on comments or anything like that. It's just sometimes I'm human. I'm in a bad mood. I'm stressed out or had a bad day. I see a really stupid take, or I see piece of shit behavior, and I just can't help myself, and I lash out.
No, you definitely aren't afraid to say what you think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's I mean, it makes for a good. Well, I follow you on Twitter. I mean, so I think it's a good quality, and in addition to sharing knowledge, that you share opinions. I think it's one that I am a little bit envious of, because I'm not.
Well, you can always create an account, Phil.
That's true. That's true.
You
Maybe
can
I
always
have already.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Zero Hedge, but Zero Hedge is run by multiple people,
Oh, I didn't
right?
know that, actually.
Yeah, it's a team of people now.
Hmm.
It started out as one pseudonym, but it now I forget how many they have. But there are a lot of sites like this where you think it's one person, but there are multiple people behind it, and maybe Rachel Lee's Thinks has more than one person behind it.
Maybe.
No one knows, and you can always, right? You can always ghostwrite. People who read Rachel Lee's Things don't care. I don't think really care about who is this person. They just care about what is written.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's ironic, right? Because I'm sure you've seen it, but there are occasions when someone just comes into my timeline and just provokes me. They just want to fight. They just want to argue. They want to win an argument.
Yeah.
And my attitude is kind of like, um, the whole point of sharing is so that, right, people have, um, some of it resonates, some of it doesn't. Like, what are you trying to accomplish by arguing? Like, I'm supposed to rewrite my life experience so that it fits your view of the world. It's like, because I'm not very philosophical, right?
Mhm.
Most of my tweets, a vast majority start off with, this happened to me. This is what I did about it. Or you should do it this way because this is why it works. And I've lived it. Like, it's very personal. And so, like, I have a very low tolerance for people who try to come and pick fights or win arguments. It's like, you can win all the arguments. I kind of don't care. I just wake up, and when I'm done with my routines and things I need to do, I just right away whatever is on my mind. And some of it is, starts by reading other stuff, but
Yeah.
a lot of it has nothing to do with anything. Um, and Yeah,
Yeah.
I just yeah, I sometimes wish I would have more followers, because there's a piece of me that says, I'm not getting feedback. Um, have you noticed, like, some people, like, will write something really absurd or stupid, and they get a lot of likes, and
Oh,
then
yeah. That's how it goes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and mine is oftentimes just, wow, did two people read this?
Well, you're
Did
well, you're
yeah,
talking. The thing is, because of a lot of what you're saying is kind of lived experience and direct advice on topics that you're well qualified to speak about. I think a lot of readers, like people, like to respond to opinions where they feel their opinion is just as valid or more valid. But when you're talking about, here's how here's something you can do to make your company, whatever, to better
yeah.
lead a company. Most people reading don't think they know better, and it's not like, it's not an opinion. I mean, it technically could be an opinion, but it's not a take.
Yeah, it's not really a take, but I didn't think about it that way. So maybe I should weave in some more opinions.
I mean, you definitely get more
Um,
engagement on opinions, because
I do get more engagement on opinions, like when I ask, like, what do you prefer to be called, or something like that.
Mhm.
So I think you're right. Yeah, yeah, I feel like a fool for not having thought through it that way. But yeah, I never. There are a lot of times, like, because some of what I write I know is kind of useless. Some of what I write I'm proud of. Like, I pat myself on the back, like, hey, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, but it, like, it just feels like no one reads it, and everyone is like, wow, what a useless piece of crap this was. Like, why did I waste 2 minutes reading this garbage? So I do sometimes long for that feedback, but I discovered a while ago that I'm just never going to get it because of the nature of who I am, and the anonymity pushes a lot of people away. There are a lot of people who are secret kind of readers.
Mhm.
Like, you follow me overtly. There are a lot of people like you who, if you look at my, can we take a minute to talk about the profile of my followers or
Yeah,
readers?
absolutely.
Do you mind? I don't,
No
because
problem.
it may be boring to everyone but me. Um, um, so right now, I think I have like 600 followers, and I know most of them. I know them, meaning I research them. Um,
Okay.
I try to see what they write about, retweet, like, and kind of what they're interested in, their handle profile. Um, I would say about like 3 out of 4 are poker enthusiasts.
Mhm.
Most of the that group, they're not really pros. I'd say a vast majority are people who work for a living and play poker on the side to varying levels. But portion of the poker playing kind of population, maybe let's call it what's 300 or so, maybe more. So there are well recognized pros in there who yeah, like Chance Corneth, Ike, I know is one, you, Andrew Nemi, Brad Owen, a lot of people, even Johnny Vibes, who I think 2 3 years ago I attacked for his markup and what have you. I've changed my mind on Johnny Vibes, by the way. I like him a lot. I think he's shown through action that he's one of the good guys in poker. So I like Johnny a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, my point is, it's interesting to see who who doesn't care um, and is purely interested in my writings versus there are a lot of people who send me DMs and oh I can't follow you because you attacked my friend or I'm close to this person and I don't want them to think
Yeah.
I'm a fan of your writing or anything. There's a lot of that, and so it's it always makes me understand and empathize, but also shake my head because one of the things that makes poker so different from any other endeavor is that it really attracts and keeps very independent-minded people.
Yeah.
And so, although the community and kind of the friend group is needed to survive and right, you can't do it alone. You can't do anything alone in life. But the fact that people are so scared or worried about how they may appear, if I were to be able to sit down with them over a cup of coffee, I would say, um, you know, why does it matter? I promise you, you're overthinking things. They don't care. They're not going to dictate who you read, what you think. They're your friend. If they're your friend, they're your friend. And if you really think I'm wrong and you're, worried, um, maybe you need to get new friends. It's like, don't worry about it. And so that's sad
Yeah.
to see because, yeah, I've had to give a lot of private responses and kind of quote unquote support or help to people who had questions but were afraid to ask openly because maybe 6 months ago I called Kara Scott a moron or jerk or whatever, and Kara Scott's popular, so to be associated with anyone who could say anything otherwise is um, you know hurts their bottom line.
Is that a true story
uh,
though? Cares pretty great.
no, I'm just making things up.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered a variety of topics. I really appreciate all your insight, and it's been a fun conversation. um, I'm I'm especially, I don't know, eager to see as you I don't know, give some more thought to getting more engagement on Twitter and your goals there, perhaps some evolution, and I'll do a better job of honestly, I think the reason I don't personally engage that much is because I'm not spending a lot of time on Twitter, and I come back after like 2 days of not being on Twitter, and you've had like 12 threads, and I can't keep up. But what something
So
I'll
I should slow down, right? That's the
well,
message.
for for
No, I'm kidding.
for me personally, yeah, but maybe not for everybody. But I'll engage when I see something interesting. Are there any thoughts you want to leave me with, or our viewers or listeners with before we go?
No, I just hope people keep sharing their views. The more, the merrier. You know, the visual I always bring up is rocks need to slam against each other to get rounded and beautiful. So I hope more people, especially people who aren't the well known names, kind of share more liberally, write more, and I hope you and I also get a chance to have more conversations down the road. This was a lot more fun than I thought it'd be.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. It was actually very fun. I thought it'd be interesting, but it actually turned out to be, a lot more fun than I thought, and interesting too.
Cool. Thank you again. I'm glad you had fun. I had fun too, and I look forward to talking in the future as well. Um, that's it. Well, everybody watching and listening,
Thanks for having me, Phil.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sticking with us this long. Hopefully you found it interesting, and I will see you next time somewhere. Take care.